we've said this many times. You can have drive-thru or you can have candlelight. What kind of dinner do you want?
Yep.
One takes more time to prepare, one takes more time to enjoy. And usually over that candlelight, you are looking at and being looked at by the one that you're having dinner with.
Right.
Versus
looking out the window,
the
windshield of your car while you're scarfing down Chick-fil-A.
And driving with your legs, you know?
Yeah.
With God, there is always more. More love, more life, more freedom. Welcome to Zoweh's Exploring More with Michael Thompson. C.S. Lewis once wrote, "Our Heavenly Father has provided many delightful ends for us along our journey, but He takes great care to see that we do not mistake any of them for home." Join me and the team as we explore the kingdom together, discovering the deep truths and offering encouragement for the journey. There is always more. Welcome, friends and allies, to the Exploring More podcast. Michael Thompson hanging out with the one and only S.J. Jennings.
Yeah.
And we are exploring more in the kingdom of God and talking about kingdom things and trying to discover more of what God has for us. Who He wants to be.
It occurs to me that it really doesn't matter what you're talking about. You're talking about kingdom things.
Always.
Right? It's all in the kingdom.
Yep.
And it all matters. So
that's right. And so as we've been chatting, and walking together in Zoweh, and just came out of a very significant weekend event for men, and that's one of the things Zoweh does.
King Me Advance.
Yep. Yeah. And this topic or this headline of getting away with God just kind of came to us. Yeah, that'd be a great thing to explore more.
Mm-hmm.
You know, what are the facets of that? What's the reality of that? And what happens when you do that? So this is we'll just call it, Caleb, a multi-part series. We may drop these from time to time about getting away with God. And in general, SJ, I think probably the biggest thing that comes up in my heart is it's a good idea. It's just really a good idea.
It is, yeah.
To get away with God, to make time. And I know growing up for me, and we have a different storyline where growing up for me in the church, you just heard, I remember, I don't know how young, quiet time. Having a quiet time, doing your quiet time.
Favorite thing for a little boy, right?
Oh,
to hear. Yeah, great. I have to be quiet. Awesome.
Right, and it started probably in middle school with youth group, and this is what you do. There were acronyms to it. I remember ACTS. Acknowledge, confess.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks and supplication. I can't believe I remembered that.
I can.
That's like when, if that's like when we're with our friend Jim Chenet and there's anything Catholic, he can rip those prayers off. It's just in him. From all the Catholic.
I remember the Greek alphabet because I pledged a fraternity.
Oh,
30 years ago or whatever it was.
The things we remember, right?
Yeah, man, it's crazy.
So
the Boy Scout
motto.
Well, the motto is be prepared, right?
Yep.
But then there's the what is it? The Scout Law: trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly, courteous, kind, obedient, cheerful, thrifty, brave, clean, reverent.
That sounded like the fruits of the Spirit, right?
I
there.
know. I can't believe I just remembered that.
Half of those,
I couldn't remember it half the time when the Scoutmaster would ask me.
All right.
But
I didn't get my merit badge for that one, but now I can do it. And I'm serious, man. Half of those were in Galatians as the fruit of the Spirit.
No doubt.
So no wonder it's good to be a Cub Scout, Boy Scout.
Yeah.
I never heard it like that. That's my point.
Right.
Quiet time and Bible study and exegesis and doing the all good things. But I felt like it was more. You probably could just stick me in a cubicle. That's what feels like the environment that is.
It was a discipline.
Mm-hmm.
which is not a negative thing.
No.
But if you feel like you're being disciplined as you're being either made to or engage in a discipline, then it feels disciplinary.
It's a great point.
It takes nuance.
It takes me to, all the years of practice and training in the sport that I played. It's sit-ups and push-ups. I mean, the quiet time is that's how I thought of it. I'm not saying that's how everybody thinks of it, but that's how I discipline.
Yep.
And it's good for you. I've been given a lot of things that were good for me that I didn't like, but you need to take on. So I guess
grape nuts, I think, are supposedly good for you. But who likes grape nuts? If you like grape nuts, please comment below, because I want to meet the one person that enjoys grape nuts.
If you put enough honey on grape nuts,
you can get them down.
Your honey's a little crunchy. That's all it is. I'm just telling you. I used to, sugar and honey and stuff on grape nuts. Yeah, we had them. We had them at our house.
Ugh.
But maybe that's comfort food to somebody, and they have to eat that every day for the fiber or something, right? I mean, it's getting tongue in cheek, but it's at the same time, I'm like, that's kind of quiet time. And I'm not saying I didn't enjoy learning the scriptures and reading the scriptures.
Yeah. You got to do push-ups.
Yeah. And the routines that can often come. But I couldn't say, SJ, that in that practice, I was getting away with God.
Right.
Which feels far more of an invitation to relationship with God than learning about God. This was study, which is what my quiet times kind of felt like.
Yeah.
And again, this has a lot more to do with me the more I think about it. And I had the sense too of when it came to prayer, I was kind of filling out a form, not literally, but I was filling out a form and kind of, sticking it under God's door, or he had a box, and I just
kind of
watch it go in there and hope that he would take care of a few things.
Do you love me? Check yes or no, right? When you're a kid.
So
this
idea of getting away with God and I want to focus on a retreat or getting away, and I don't want to sound prideful, and yet the weekends that we get to arrange or the environments in which we get to construct for the hearts of men and women, I feel like they depict that idea of getting away with God. I've heard some men say, man, you shouldn't call this a retreat. I'm exhausted. And it's not because they're so busy. It's not because it's so full, because we have a schedule.
Yeah, we give them 3+ hours of free time.
But there's
recess.
But work. The whole point of even the sessions, as I look back at them in this last weekend, is so that men can then, or women in the deepening weekend, as it comes along soon, so that they can get away with God.
Yeah. It's hard to engage that way in day-to-day life, in the midst of day-to-day life, in the midst of the chores and going to the grocery store, and the kid needs to be dropped off at soccer practice and all of that. It's really hard to do that. And so we encourage guys to come to the weekend to try to maybe make up some ground. Yeah. You've said it before, get out of the matrix. Yeah, exactly. Pull out of there. Yep. So you can focus on some of these things that the Father wants to meet you in. Yeah. Right? So, I think there's a progression to getting away with God, right? This idea that, okay, I went to a retreat so I could drown out all the noise of my life and hear from God. And then I'm going to leave the retreat and leave God there. Yeah. And move back into all the noise of my life. And the goal is to try to integrate the two, ultimately. Right. So it's not, getting away with God, and then that's done. So now I'm going to get away from God and go back to the things that distract me. Yeah, or I've heard guys say, they come back. Sometimes there's the alumni, and
it's this go to the mountain, go to the mountain to get away with God. And I think what you're talking about is really important. You want the both and, not the either or, that you get away, you retreat to be with God so that you can then re-enter the battle of day to day with God.
Our friend Gary Barklow says it really, really well. He says, this weekend for most of you, from what we can tell, has been extraordinary. Mm-hmm. And we want you to know that this can now be your ordinary.
Yeah. Your new normal.
Yep. In the somewhat mundane operation of day-to-day life, your interaction and God's presence and your acknowledgement of his presence, right? We don't pray for the presence of God. The presence of God is there.
We acknowledge,
right? Exactly.
We enter in.
So this extraordinary experience. I said it one time at the end of a weekend we did, Michael. I said that many of you have had a mountaintop experience while you were here, and I'm here to tell you that you can take the mountain with you. Mm-hmm. Right?
Yeah,
you can have the mountaintop experience at home. So that's what we're proposing, is that rather than this idea of I have to shut off all of the regular life that exists for so many of us in order to encounter God, how do we bring them together?
Yeah.
And experience God. And I'm not saying either, and you're not either, that their retreats are important.
Right. And there's statistics that prove. Well, I mean, if you're a basketball player and you get away to a basketball camp, you go to that conference, it's going to have a result of the things that you've learned. I mean, I just did that growing up, or soccer camp, or, one of those. In business, you go into some kind of a workshop, weekend, or training weekend. It's all kind of in that vein. But getting away with God is a little different than ball handling drills, or
it is,
better time management spaces in from the consultant in the workplace. And so when I think about this thing, what makes this different? This getting away with God versus kind of like quiet time. You ready for my big reveal, revelation?
Bring it.
The question mark. The question mark.
I have questions about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well said. Well done. I want you to.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you mean by that?
When I had quiet times, or that was kind of my practice, I don't think there was one question mark in that 20 minutes or 30 minutes, even in prayer. And when I think about getting away with God, even asking the question, hey, God, what are we doing today? What do you have for me today? That was never even available to me. I never heard it. Nobody ever shared that with me until 20 years ago. The concept was kind of put in front of me. I'm like, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
That feels relational to me.
Yeah.
If I'm going to get away with Robin, I'm going to ask her to come with me.
Right.
I'm going to ask her where she wants to go. I'm going to ask her where she wants to eat. I mean, there's just something about this question mark that I feel like time alone with God, or time away with God, is really, if we're after conversation and conversational intimacy with God, then inviting him to enter into these spaces with questions, I think I know from my own experience, is beautifully critical. And then the wild thing is, I've experienced many, many times that he asks me questions.
Yeah.
And so the question mark is whether you're at a weekend or in your favorite chair, or walking one of the trails, or really integrating this into the day-to-day. Again, I'll call Robin or text her a couple times a day, and some of it's just with the flow of the day. Hey, how are you? All good?
Yeah.
And what do you want to do for dinner? What you thinking? And so that kind of, to expand on getting away with God, I know a retreat is feels like and sounds like a pretty official, you made arrangements, you got a dog sitter, you've paid your tuition.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's a pretty formal, significant commitment. And I love that. I love what happens.
It's necessary.
And at our conferences and retreats, that's just one of the significant variables that we're trying to introduce people to is conversation with God, intimacy with God, getting away with God, getting away like behind that tree or over on that bench, or finding it's funny to see how when the men and women kind of leave their sessions where they were all together hearing, one of the speakers guide them through something. And now we're going to go away into some time alone with God. And it's
Code of silence.
But after about the third one of those, I see the same guys in the same places.
They pick their spaces. Yeah.
They kind of commandeer their spot.
Right.
This is my rock. It's my tree.
Yeah.
And if the weather lets them, they're just, that becomes their sanctuary.
Yep.
And I love that.
Yeah. Yeah. There's I can't remember who I heard it from somewhere, but this idea that you go through this process in these different banks of time, like it's, and I can't remember, it's 3 R's, and one of them is retreat annually, do something else, retire monthly, and rest daily, or it's something like that. Maybe if you know what I'm referring to, listeners, I cannot remember it off the top of my head. I think it was Tony Dungy or somebody came up with that. But there's this, the importance of the retreat, but the importance of the moments too, right? That moments matter, right? You can engage with God with question marks as you go throughout your day.
Yes.
So I was recently reading a couple different books on eternity, All Things New, and then there's another book called Imagine Heaven by John Burke, and All Things New is John Eldredge. And they were talking about this kind of interaction with Jesus, and what did your life on earth look like before you were in my presence was the question that Jesus would bring. And well, let me show you, right? Because that's what we're promised, is that he's going to show us our lives. And the question that he posed that really stuck with me was, how did you love me in that moment? How did you love me? Jesus asking, how did you love me, SJ, today? So I took that and said, one of the things I love to ask, one of the things that brings me a lot of joy and is part of my glory is just asking people, how can I help you? And I used to ask that question with some strings attached, right? And I'm becoming more and more free of that. So what that inspired me to do, that interaction that I read about with Jesus, how did you love me, was to say, rather than how can I help you, I started saying to Sherry every day, how can I love you today?
That's a different word. I've
been doing it for about a month now. And what's really interesting, is her first response was, well, the window in the kitchen's kind of sticky. You could fix that for me. And she's kind of coming up with this, honey-do list almost, Well, we kind of ran out of those things. And then it became really hard. So, I mean, and what it did too was put me in the position, well, what if she asks me that question? How am I going to respond? So in your commentary about question marks, I loved what you said. Sometimes Jesus asks me questions, and I think of Jesus. I know Jesus asks me every day, how can I love you today?
Yeah.
Which then pours into me so I can go and love others, right? And that's a daily, I don't want to use the word discipline, because although discipline can bring joy, right?
Yeah.
It's a joyful thing I get to do with God every day. And it really does set the day. It's sort of like the discipline of you're taking 20,000 free throw shots so you're ready for the game. I mean,
Right.
it's that idea. It sets my mindset, my heart on God, on Jesus, and I move through my day. Now, I don't get it right all the time. I still chewed a guy out because he cut me off in traffic on the way over here. That wasn't very loving of me, right? Jesus is working on me in that regard. But it really is this daily opportunity. It just takes a couple minutes.
Yeah.
And these moments that we're talking about, they in between the big retreats when you're, maybe annually get to go away somewhere and really get away with God. You can get away with him for just these few minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And I would even offer too, Michael, many people want to get up in the morning and that's the first thing they do. And that's what I do. But I can do that during the day too.
Right.
I can do that in a moment during the day.
Let's talk. I want to move into more of those practically, kind of after the break, and because I think there's a kindness in sharing a little bit about how's that look for us, and how's getting away with God look like in the day-to-day. So we're going to jump into that in a few minutes when we'll be right back on the Exploring More podcast.
In a flash, a pathway emerges, just a few moves away. It's on the tip of your tongue. Just one more move and you can say it. King Me. Coming this spring by Michael Thompson.
Welcome back to the Exploring More podcast. Just going to want to finish up for maybe a few minutes on what that looks like, SJ, in the day-to-day. And I do I believe that this is something I like your story about how can I help you, how can I love you today? There's a shift in the mindset. There's a shift in the heart set.
Yeah.
In the perspective of, and let me just go on record real quick. Hey, reading your Bible, memorizing scripture, listening to worship music, what's been in this quiet time category for me, I'm not saying scrap all that. I'm saying add this perspective, a little shift in how can I help you? What do in the shift of Jesus, here's what I need you to do for me today.
Here's what I need you to save.
Yeah, Father, here's
help,
what, yes. Yeah,
fix.
My finances, I need you to really come through on that. And hey, my kids, would you?
Yeah, it's like the sticky window in the kitchen.
Yeah, help me to love them, things like that.
Yeah.
I get that. But the shift of those requests to really getting away with God to talk about with God, maybe a deeper exploration. I was going to say analysis, but
which works for some folks.
Yeah, I think for me, I just didn't know that he wanted to have a conversation.
Yeah.
As silly as that might sound.
No, not at all.
I didn't know that was available.
Right.
And so guess what? I didn't enter into that in any way, shape, or form.
Right.
I was kind of taught a certain way, and so that's the way I practiced.
Yep.
And it's like a lot of things until someone comes along and shows you a different way to practice for a different result. And the result for me, SJ, would be I did learn a lot about God. I knew a lot of scriptures. You could start many passages and I could finish them.
Yeah.
That kind of exposure over years has a benefit.
It does.
And yet knowing about God and walking intimately with him, I think are different things. And I would just say that and bless their hearts, the priests, the pastors, the theological elite, they know a lot about God. And yet in Jesus's time, the Pharisees were the ones that Jesus accused, like, you don't get it.
Yeah.
I'm right here.
Yeah. Yeah. I think about Michael in response to that, in a physical realm context. It's like reading about a delicious T-bone steak and eating one.
Yeah, or how
reading
to,
about
a golf
driving,
swing.
Yeah, versus nailing it and watching it go down the fairway. Reading about the thrill of driving a race car versus driving a race car.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
it's what you're talking about is called gnosko.
Right.
It's this intimate knowledge.
The Greek word of experiential, knowing God is, we kind of, you're right. I agree 1,000% that we've kind of taken that into the academic spaces. And it's good to know that way.
You have to.
But
There's
to
time for
know
that.
the experiential, that's where we want to see this. And I believe the benefit of getting away with God is closing the distance between what I've learned about God and who he really is, what he's really like.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with Ephesians. It's still good and helpful and true 20 centuries later.
Yep.
And yet, what does God have to say to me? Jesus did this on the Sermon on the Mount. I mean, you. He said, you, not us. He said, you. Aren't you more valuable than these? Mm-hmm. And God takes care of these. Your Father takes care of these. Mm-hmm. So I really believe that there is something available if we ask, seek, and knock. And if we would explore more, what is it to get away with you in the day-to-day? So there's the morning time, which that's been traditionally a part of where I get to do a lot of writing.
Yeah.
And I was just telling you the other day, now that King Me's done and the book is into published manufacture, it's kind of out of my hands. I'm a little adrift, actually.
Right.
Because I had my day, scheduled predominantly from, early morning, there's the dogs to go out, the dogs to be fed, coffee to be made. And then I'm in my chair for a couple hours just plowing. And I've enjoyed that because it's in the writing that I get to meet with God, that I get away with God.
Right.
I know that I know that I know. Gnoskos, my experience was writing, God and I do that together. Mm-hmm. I get to hear his voice. Any research or any thing that I'm looking up, I feel like I just believe he's guiding me in that process.
Right.
Kind of over my shoulder as the science teacher, and I'm the one mixing the elements.
Yeah,
it's just really fun.
It's a very intimate thing, and God has specifically wired you to interact with him that way. Yeah. And that isn't the only way that he will do. He's very personal.
Yeah.
So he's asking us this question: how can I love you today? Right. Mm-hmm. So what does that mean for you? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that was my point with bringing up Sherry. It's how do I want to be loved? That's a challenging question.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because our hearts have been handled oftentimes so poorly by the people in our lives and in our history, sometimes well. Yeah. No one can handle our heart like God can.
Right.
And so this idea of maybe first, right, before we set up the discipline of first thing in the morning, I want to talk about first thing in the morning too, the importance of first fruits, right? We think about tithing, right? Yeah. And in terms of giving to the church or making donations as being our first fruits. But that applies to our time too. Right?
That's a great point.
We're often freshest and most mentally acute in the morning. I am anyway after about 3 cups of coffee. Mm-hmm. But it doesn't mean I have to sit down and write to find that intimacy with God. That's how he's wired you, and that's how he meets you. Maybe for me, or our friend Tom talks all the time about just putting his headphones on and putting on worship music.
Soundtrack stuff, mostly.
Soundtracks.
I mean, stuff without words.
Right.
Right. He'll just listen to, meditative type, beauty, the soul, taking in the beauty of the music and position. Yes, I'm cutting you off, but I know it's a great point. Setting in a position to hear from God, to receive. Yeah. That's another great, we'll have to talk way more about that in another episode of receiving. What does that look like? If you're going to get away with God, I believe that the hope and expectation should be to receive from God what he has for you, that day, that season. And this posture, like you're talking about with Tom, listeners, if you haven't, it was maybe a year or so ago, we found the 3 mile per hour God, 3 mph God.
Yep.
And highly recommend this. There's a video that goes with Godspeed.
Just search for Godspeed on YouTube, I think it's on Vimeo.
It is Vimeo.
Yeah.
And so you'll see Eugene Peterson, N.T. Wright, and this man who the story's about, who learned to walk with God versus all the things he was trying to do for God.
Episcopal priest.
Yes. This
right?
is a story, a 10-minute, 12-minute video about not doing for God, but walking with God, 3 miles per hour.
Mm-hmm.
So that came to
down.
us as another affirmation of slowing down, third gear. And that brings me back to your point about, for me, writing, journaling, or the process of a blog at the Warrior's Heart blog, or even your recent organizing your thoughts to share with the men about grief and the significance and the freedom that's there in grief, getting away with God to write. Now you may not think you're getting away with God. I'm just doing a talk. I'm writing a talk. I'm saying there's a difference between how can I help you and how can I love you today? There's a perspective
100%,
shift.
Yeah.
And I'm inviting listeners to discover the perspective shift of, what if you weren't writing a talk? What if you were getting away with God? To organize your thoughts and the things that he's shared with you and to ponder the experience.
Not for the men in the room, for
you.
me. Yes.
Because that's what they need to hear.
I got to tell this story, man, really quickly. I sat down in my office here at the Tower in Durham to write out my thoughts on my laptop. I get 3 bullet points in, and I start to write a bullet point to tell the story about the path and the fork in the path. And God, I just get this impression of, write this as a story. So I said, well, I can tell the story. Write this as a story. So I'm like, okay. And I'm telling you, man, it came out of me in about 15 minutes. And
that's awesome. Yeah. And
then I went back to when that was done, and I felt like God and I walked, and he revealed some things to me in it. Maybe I'll share it. I don't know how we would share it, but Caleb and Josh can figure that out. But I have it available, and maybe there's a link we can put up to it.
I think we got to do it as a podcast in this series.
Oh, no, I definitely want to talk about grief.
Yeah.
I mean, and all of that. But I can share the story on air maybe. But the point in all that is, I'm sitting at my desk in my office, and God walks in the door. And one of the most loving things he's done for me is to invite me into that process.
Yeah.
And again, this was writing. It feels like we're talking about meeting him in writing a lot.
Yeah.
It really, it doesn't have to be that way. And we are, again, I want to reinforce.
No, it does have to be that way. You should do that. No,
it's important
but you
to be in the scripture.
Here's the point. You got to try writing.
Right.
You don't know.
Try journaling.
That's right.
Get up, and if you're a morning time guy, quiet time guy, that you're reading the Bible. I know several of my friends who are reading the Bible in a year because they've never done that before. Read the Bible in the year, but talk about it with the guy that's doing it with you. That's a friend of yours.
Yeah.
Read the Bible in a year, but write down your thoughts about what you just read.
Yeah.
You know, so it is important. Pick up the ball and try shooting, because if you don't, you don't know.
It was either Gretzky or Larry Bird, right? You miss 100% of the shots you don't take.
Yeah.
So that's it, SJ. The practice, the attempts, the learning.
I thought that was Big Jim Thompson, actually.
Yeah, it is. I think that's right. He said it first. But that's the whole point of if you haven't written out your prayers, give that a shot.
Right.
See what that feels like.
Yep.
And the way that the pen and the paper slow down.
Yes.
That's the point, is slowing down. Another thing that I've found about getting away with God, I practice it most of the time, but I can kind of fall into that inner dialogue kind of, you know how you can, most of us will pray silently, which means you're not saying anything out loud, your mouth's not moving, and you're just kind of trying to move your thoughts in that direction. If I'm like everybody else or everybody else is like me, it's just a matter of moments before in the current of my mind, I'm gone. I'm lost. I'm like, man, this, Jesus, I'm giving you the bubble thoughts.
Yeah.
Thank you for today. And man, I think my coffee's getting cold. You just.
Yeah. Robin told me the car needs gas, right?
Yeah,
I mean, stuff like that
so
comes in.
But there's something that's available to us if we can move our lips and speak out loud. You don't get pulled away or sucked away into all the other conscious thoughts or subconscious thoughts if you can take a walk, and if you can, wherever you're sitting, if you can articulate that stuff out loud, how you're feeling, what you're thinking. There's even ways in which to pray. You said this earlier. We're not asking God to be with us. We are acknowledging that He is and declaring that He always will be.
We're not asking Him to love us.
That's that shift from
declaring that
helping to loving. And those shifts are important. I think if we're going to talk about getting away with God, I want to help people do that well, because there's nothing more frustrating than being invited to do something and it not going well,
right?
Or not knowing how to do it,
right?
Or
I talk to God, but it's silence. I never hear from Him. I mean, there's a lot of challenges there. A
lot of things that you can you can dive into, and I definitely want to explore more about what does that look like, and personal silent retreats. Again, I say silent as if you can't speak. I'm not talking about the old monastery. I'm just saying, but what if you just get away?
Yeah.
This is the most important. We've all signed on to say this is the most important relationship in our lives. We know that theologically.
Yep.
But the practice, the shots that we're taking, and the practice that I don't think that the traditional quiet time will produce in you the kind of love that you were meant for and are to receive, so that you said earlier, so that you could love in that way. And so getting away with God, this is a big, good subject.
I love that perspective. Let me just say, I immediately go to my wife, Sherry, who's the second most important person in my life in terms of priority, God being number one. But man, if I were not engaging in conversation with her for 24, 48, 72 hours.
Oh my gosh.
It would be soul crushing for her.
Mm-hmm.
So what if we're not doing that with God? Like it's not soul crushing for Him, obviously, but we're missing out on this idea of relationship with Him, right?
Yeah.
And it's very important to again, Michael, we want to keep the enemy at bay, and help people to understand that this is a journey, right? We're exploring with the idea that we're on a path or walking with God. And so if you're frustrated because you feel like God is silent, you feel like, oh, I've tried all those things, I'm not hearing anything from Him, send us an email, exploringmore@zoweh.org. We, maybe we can connect with you and help you sort that out some.
Yeah. I found that the daily prayer, when it was first offered to me, was revolutionary in how I pray.
Mm-hmm.
And so on our website, you can just search our website, The Daily Prayer, and it's an audio that you can listen to. It's a download that you can take in. Again, there's a certain way. There is a way things work. Mm-hmm. A golf swing, a jump shot. You're a gearhead, mechanics. I mean, there's a way things work.
Yeah.
And there's a way things work in the kingdom, and getting away with God and learning a practice that not only helps you, sustains you, but is an exchange of love with you and God. Oh my gosh, that is.
Who wouldn't want more of that?
I'm telling you. So I want to close this with a radical thought this time, and hopefully maybe this will give us a place to jump into next time.
Mm-hmm.
But Sabbath, Sundays, and this goes for young dads, and man, this is going to be a challenging one. But what if you didn't go to church one Sunday a month? And you took those couple hours. Now you'd have to work that out with your wife, and you may have to do your
questions are better than answers.
Your Sunday
right?
and her Sunday.
Right.
You know,
we want to bring
the
question.
You may have to work it out.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
Oh, I mean, I just remember all those Sundays and wrangling the kids, and we got there. Yeah, we were late, and
get your shoes, gritted teeth.
Well, it's such a bruising space sometimes church can be. But because it's another appointment, it's another thing that we're hustling to get done, and I'm not saying every Sunday's like that, but
we're not saying church isn't important and you shouldn't go to church,
and you don't have
to
boycott church. No, but if the purpose is to connect with God and other people, and you need a time and space in your full week, maybe that Sunday morning is a space to recapture. I know there's men that work, 12-hour shifts, and so how do you work this in is my point. Again, if Sabbath is for rest and God makes that a time to get away with him, to reflect, to ponder. We've said this many times. You can have drive-thru or you can have candlelight. What kind of dinner do you want?
Yep.
One takes more time to prepare, one takes more time to enjoy. And usually over that candlelight, you are looking at and being looked at by the one that you're having dinner with.
Right.
Versus
looking out the window,
the windshield
of your car while you're scarfing down Chick-fil-A.
And driving with your legs,
Yeah.
So, I mean, that, as funny as it is, I think that's probably more descriptive of my quiet times in the past was, a drive-through, getting it done, versus kind of pushing against the gravitational pull to busyness. And I get it. Everybody's got a lot of crap to do. There's a lot going on. And yet, how important could it be to ask God, what's really going on?
Mm-hmm.
Would you give me both wisdom and revelation? Wisdom and revelation. And it's the revelations of God that we have that actually turn into the wisdom of God that we enjoy and can practice.
Yeah.
So, I'm looking forward to a couple more conversations on what does this look like? And I think we could say without question, it has its benefits. It has its benefits. And I would definitely want to talk some more about that. But we'll save some more for the next time. Any closing thoughts? Any last?
Yeah, I just want to make abundantly clear, like you said, we all have a lot to do. And this is not we're not proposing that you're adding another thing to a checklist. What we're proposing is that this is a way to live.
Yeah.
Rather than a thing to do.
Yeah. And we could give a list of people who live this way, and you can read their books. You can listen to their YouTubes.
Absolutely.
And I hope we're in that category, but sooner or later, you have to toe the free throw line and you take some shots. You have to step into the driving range and you try to hit it.
Yeah.
You have to, grab the wrench and start this process of what we hope would be more life, more love, more freedom, a deeper intimacy with God and even you, yourself, and deeper intimacy with your own heart.
Right, knowing yourself better.
Because God knows your heart and wants your heart. So,
yeah, it just occurred to me, I think what is the physician heal thyself? It's how about Christian know thyself?
Yeah, that's the Thompson family crest.
Which one?
Back to the ages. Know thyself.
Is it really?
The Latin? Yep, on the shield. Yeah,
that's cool, man.
It is cool. I love it. You just brought it up, but it's
wow.
There's something profound in that space, as
question.
You're saying that. But I think that profound ability to see it comes to those who slow down and ponder, ask God questions. Why do I feel the way I feel?
Yeah.
What is this in me? What's going on?
Right.
Why does this always happen?
Right.
What do you think, God? What should I say? How should I handle this? Versus, would you handle this for me? Would you take care of this?
Yeah.
Would you do this? Would you do that? But
yeah.
but the doing it with you seems to be his preference.
Oh yeah.
As opposed to just doing it for you.
Yeah.
And getting away with him is going to be a critical element of that. So yeah, thanks listeners for being with us. Appreciate your consideration of this as we kind of unpack it.
Yep.
And
yeah. Send us an email, exploringmore@zoweh.org. Comment below in the comment section. We'll put some of the links to some of the things we referenced. The video.
It's Godspeed.
Godspeed. Thank you. On Vimeo, we'll put the link down there and see if I can, if Caleb and Josh can figure out a way to get the link to my grief story. And we'll talk about grief. We're going to get into that in later episodes too. It's very important to talk about. So anyway,
really good.
Thank you so much. Share this link. Share the podcast and Exploring More on your podcast platform of choice. And thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time on the Exploring More podcast. We hope you have enjoyed this episode of Exploring More. The landing page for this podcast is zoweh.org/podcast. That's ZOWEH.org/podcast, where you can find the show notes and various platforms to which we broadcast. You can also find us and the life of more by visiting Zoweh on YouVersion Bible app, Right Now Media, our Facebook page, and Zoweh on Instagram and Twitter. Remember, with God there is always more, and you were made for more.